Hey everybody, welcome on in. Clayshare Con Day 4, just rolling along. We have a really great little segment ready for you right now with Drew from Clayscapes Pottery, and he is going to help you figure out what is the best kiln for you. So we're going to set it on over to Drew right now. Hey Drew.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Drew. I'm here at Clayscapes again, and we're going to talk about kilns and what kiln is best for you. One of my biggest pet peeves, I suppose, is like online shopping for kilns. It's really difficult to find, good information on, what exactly is the kiln for you. So I've kind of come up with a couple of things that will help you guys determine what you're going to be looking at. So we are a full line clay distributor here at Clayscapes. I sell clay and glaze and raw materials and wheels and glazes and all those things, but we also sell kilns. And one of the things that you need to decide first to decide what kind of kiln.
You're still seeing me as I'm cleaning up.
Oh,
Did you not switch it? Oh, sorry, everybody. See, you got to see me clean up the area because I'm trying to set up so I can moderate for you. I am so sorry. Now can we see Drew? Kevin's fired now, you guys. I have to get a new camera person. Anybody want to apply? Send me an email.
So what
thank you guys. Thank you for telling us. Drew, I'm sorry. Go ahead and we'll
don't
get
be
this.
sorry. We're having fun. We're having fun.
Well, yeah, it's all fun.
So there's a couple things that you need to take into account when you're trying to pick your kiln. Size of the kiln is one. And what you want to find out is what you want to use to find out what's the best kiln for you is what's the kind of work that you're making. Are you making bigger flat work? Are you making mugs and bowls? These things are going to dictate the size of the kiln that you want to get. The second thing, and we're going to go into depth on all of these, but the second thing is you have a budget as far as how much you want to spend, but you also have a budget on electricity. And what people don't always think about is what's the minimum or what's the maximum electrical budget that you have. Do you have 60 amps available for a kiln, or do you only have 30? Because if you only have 30, you're only going to be able to use certain kilns. So I have over to the side here some kiln shelves set up with work on them. And we're going to look at each of these size categories and, see what, so we can visualize them. I can also take a walk over to my kiln area and show you some of the kilns that we have here at Clayscapes. And then we can talk about differences. I know a lot of people always have questions about, should I get a Scott, or should I get an L&L, or should I get a cone art? And those things I also can address for you guys. So I'm going to switch my camera around so that I can see what I have over here. Boop. All right. Now, this is my little setup here for different size kiln shelves. So we'll start here. This is the size shelf that Jessica has for her little baby kiln, the test kiln, the doll kiln. And you guys can see we can fit about 4 mugs on this little shelf. Okay. So the doll kilns are really small. They usually take a 9 or a 10-inch kiln shelf, and they aren't really, you're not really going to stack them 2 sections high. So you really aren't going to get too tall in there. Each section is 9 inches tall, which is right here. So, in reality, we may be able to fit another shelf in here with some smaller stuff. So that's what
the doll kiln is the doll kiln only 9 inches tall?
Yes.
It's only 9. So
it's
I
a 9
can,
inch tall interior.
Interior, right. So I can get that very bottom shelf. So I can actually do a little tiny plate and then 4 mugs is what I can do.
Yeah.
For me in mine, but or I can get a bunch of little things. But if I was doing mugs, that's how it would work. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the mugs, and then I just put the cookie jar back there because I thought it was cute and it matches all the mugs, little owls.
Very cute.
A step up from this, normally, the next step up is going to be an 18-inch kiln. And this is what we have here for an 18-inch kiln. That's got a 15-inch kiln shelf, 18 inches wide on the inside. And then these kilns have an 18-inch tall interior. And so you can make, this bottle here is like 14.5 inches tall. So any of those kilns that are 2 sections, like the new kiln that you will be getting, the 28S, the 23S, the 18S, any of these 2-section kilns, you're still going to be able to make something as tall as that bottle there. And so that's the kind of size range we're looking at there. Now, L&L is coming out with a new kiln that is in between the doll kilns and the 18Ss that we sell. And it's, instead of taking a 10-inch or a 15-inch kiln shelf, it's going to take a 12-inch kiln shelf. And then instead of being 9 inches tall, it'll be 18 inches tall. So that's the newest kiln coming to the market here. And then we're going to move over to the, this is probably my most popular size kiln, the 23s. So 23 is a kiln that has a 23-inch diameter. And that is like the kiln that you have, the E23T. And that kiln there is going to be able to stack a lot. It's a bigger kiln. And you can go high, it's going to go 18 inches tall to 27 inches tall. And then the final kiln, and we're talking width for most of these dimensions. The final kiln is the 28. And so this has got a 25-inch kiln shelf on it with, this is a 24-inch platter. And you can make some bigger stuff. So basically you just have to decide, what kind of work are you going to be making and how tall is it going to be so that you can decide what kind of kiln you want. We can go over to the kilns next if you want.
We got a couple of questions too. So I saw people asking about the doll kiln. Drew at Clayscapes Pottery sells the doll kilns, and I have the DLH11 DX is what I have. And mine will go to cone 10.
Yes.
Mine will go to cone 10. So folks who are asking, and then someone was asking, does a small and 18 fire to cone 10? You can get them to go to cone 10.
Yes.
You can get it configured so that it can go to cone 10, but there are considerations like Drew was mentioning about.
So the thing about kilns are your cone rating. Anybody firing mid-range like cone 5, cone 6, you want to have a kiln that's rated to cone 10. And that a lot of it has less to do with the cone and the kiln and more to do with the electricity available. Now I'm going to show you my kilns. These are the doll kilns.
Yes, so cute.
So, and you can see all of our tests. But just you can see inside that those 4 mugs, are going to fit in here and in here. So these are the doll kilns. So they're, they're perfect for, ice cream bowls and mugs and little tests, things like that. All of our glazes that we make here, every single batch gets a test gets run through these little kilns. So they're always working. And then we go from those.
Question: how far off the bottom should your first shelf be?
I always put like a 1/2-inch post.
Yeah, that's what I do too. Usually, just a little 1/2-inch post. We'll use
a 1/2-inch post, or we'll use like a broken kiln shelf to stoke those up. We're gonna go down the line here. This kiln is being repaired. So we're not going to be able to look into it, but this is my oldest kiln. It's an L&L E28T. So it's the biggest of the hobby kilns, I would say. And it's got the 28-inch interior and the 27-inch tall, but I'm in the middle of fixing that. So we're going to skip over the big guy.
Drew, can you also tell the cubic feet for each one? So like the doll kiln, that's like half a cubic foot, right?
Yes, the doll kiln's like a half a cubic foot. This is the same size as the 28T, but it's got the quad element upgrade. You see that double layer of elements there? That's the quad upgrade. So
now mine's going to have the double elements.
Yes, yours is going to have the quad elements. And these are 10 cubic feet. So the 28-inch kilns, the 28-inch wide, 3-section tall, are 10 cubic feet. Okay.
Yes. And the one I just ordered is only 2 sections tall, though. So
yes, it's 2 sections tall, so it's going to be 7 cubic feet, similar to your 3-section 23.
Yeah, so the same size.
And then we have a couple of beefier manufacturing kilns that most of you guys are just not going to use. So I could get into those another time, but they're just bigger. You know, they have more elements. They have a lot more electricity.
We have a bunch of questions about can a film fire on 120 or 110? Like a doll.
So the doll kilns are available for 110. Those kilns that are available for 110 have a maximum firing temperature of cone 5 or cone 6. So if you're doing cone 5 or cone 6 work, it will do it, but not great. You know, it's one of those things where it'll do it every once in a while. You don't want to fire it constantly to cone 5 or 6 because you're going to wear it out a lot quicker.
Yeah, and back to the quad elements, we had a few questions about why you'd want quad elements in your kiln.
So the quad elements are an optional upgrade for your easy fire kilns. Yeah, you're funny. My dad's being funny. He's walking through talking to kilns to a customer here. The quad elements are a good upgrade. I find that they work really well on the 10 cubic foot kilns when you're firing a lot of flat work. So if you're firing a lot of platters, a lot of tile work, on those 10 cubic foot kilns, if we look at this platter here, on a 10 cubic foot kiln, if we have a lot of flat layers, meaning, if I had another kiln shelf right here, and then another platter, and then another kiln shelf right here, what's going to happen is the center all the way up is going to be cool. It's going to be a cold spot, and you'll get cracking. The quad elements help spread out and heat up the kiln a lot more evenly, but they are overkill if you're not firing a lot of flat work. So, most people, will see that and say, oh, quad elements, more elements means more better. That's not necessarily the case. It runs the same amount of electricity through more elements, and you get into having to replace elements that are more expensive when you don't necessarily need them. So the quad elements are really good in certain situations. The kiln that I have over there is not an easy fire. It's an E-Quad Pro, meaning it's designed to have the quad elements. It's not upgraded with quad elements. And those are good for crystalline and high fire cone 10 firings.
And I just wanted to interject. I got the quad elements. I'm getting a new kiln. It's the E28S.
The quad elements.
With the quad elements. And the reason I did that is I do a lot of plates and platters, a lot of big plates and platters. So for me, I knew I was going to do lots of layers. I needed the quad elements. If you wanted a wider kiln, you don't necessarily need the
you don't need them. It's just if you want that, that security blanket of being able to say, like, I know that it's going to be a really nice, even firing. I'm not going to get any warping or cracking on my plate because of how densely loaded it is, you want the quad elements. But for the everyday potter who's doing, just the hobby stuff, they're unnecessary in my opinion. So let me look at the comments here a little. So yeah, we are doing a promo right now on the L&L kilns. Basically, if you get a kiln and a furniture kit, or a kiln and a vent, you get a free upgrade to the Genesis controller, which is the touchscreen controller that you have on your kiln there that everybody sees in the kiln openings. I find that I like the Genesis controller a lot more. It has a lot more versatility. You can run diagnostics off of the Genesis controller that you can't do off of the others. So, you can test your elements or your relay health directly from the controller rather than having to get in there with the probes and poke the electricity.
I see the question about why so many thermocouples?
Why so many thermocouples? Yes, one of the big differences between L&L and other kiln brands is each layer of the kiln has its own thermocouple. What happens is, and I'll just take a scut for example. The scut is got one thermocouple and it's in the middle section. So when you fire the kiln, what happens is the elements heat up, the thermocouple measures the temperature in the kiln, relays that temperature back to the computer, which says it's supposed to be raising temperature X amount of degrees an hour. And it basically keeps track of it. And then the computer tells the elements when to turn on and off based on the information it gets from the thermocouples. The L&L, which has 3 thermocouples, measures the temperature in each zone. And then the computer can tell one zone to fire and one zone to hold because it needs to autocorrect. It gives you a more even firing, and they adjust themselves so that they fire together as a unit rather than just firing the whole kiln on or off or on or off. So Scott does have the 3 element option, or the 3 thermocouple option. Yes, that is new. Did somebody ask about the vent system? I think I saw.
Yeah. Is the vent the whole vent system?
So let me go over and show you guys the vents. Let me go back over there. Pick you guys up and go. Let's see here. All right, so when we go over to my kilns, I have 6 kilns. We don't have the baby kilns hooked up to vents, but we do have all of our bigger kilns hooked up to vents. And I'm going to flop the camera around here so you can see. So what happens is underneath the kiln is a collection box. That collection box gets piped over and up to the vent, which is way up there. That vent has a motor, which then exhausts all of the gases. Now, I just recently replaced the vent system on these 2, and I vented it in PVC. And so these vent system here is going to go up and then out to the motor and then out. So what normally comes with your vent system, if you were to order a vent, you're going to get the motor and the pipe and the mount, and then you're going to get a flexible metal hose, and then you're going to get the thing underneath that attaches, and that's what's going to come with your vent system.
Can you change to a Genesis controller if you have another one on your existing kiln?
Yeah. So typically the Genesis, like if you buy a kiln brand new and you buy your brand new kiln with a Genesis controller on it, that's normally a $175 upgrade, which if you buy your kiln now through Clayscapes, you'll get that free. But if you bought a kiln 3 years ago and you decide you want the Genesis controller, depending on the kiln, you can, yes, substitute the Genesis controller. That I think it's like $350 or $400 when you buy the Genesis by itself. And that's because it's on a new kiln, they're taking the Dynatrol controller's cost out And the difference in cost between the Dynatrol and the Genesis is 175, basically. So yeah, do I need a baby kiln? Do I need to vent a baby kiln if it's in my studio? I mean, it's always nice to vent a kiln, right? Like when you're firing work creates gas, and that gas has to go somewhere. The vent is the safest way to get it outside and not into the environment of your studio. We don't vent our baby kilns because we are firing them with like one tiny little piece of, test tile in them. So, we're not so worried about them. That being said, especially if you are looking at buying a smaller kiln to do things like luster firings, if you're planning on doing lusters and luster firings, you absolutely will need a vent. Like, you got to have a vent. It's important. Yeah. How high
does don't go ahead and answer.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, can you talk about how easy it is to replace the elements or repair the elements in an L&L?
Yeah. So the L&Ls have, when we were over there, you can see inside it has those hard ceramic tracks that run around the outside of the kiln, and the elements sit inside those tracks. So if I were to replace my elements on a Paragon or a Crest or a Scud, those elements go straight into the soft brick, and then they're held in place by metal pins. In order to replace those elements, you have to pull out all the pins first. Then you can take the elements out. And then you put the new elements in, and then you replace the pins in each of the corners. In the L&Ls, there's no pins. The elements just slide into the tracks. You may have to stretch the element a tiny little bit here or there, but they just slide in, and that's it. So, any kind of kiln repair where I have to do pins may take me 2-3 hours to do, will only take me like an hour on an L&L, which is why I like them. They're a lot easier to work on, in my opinion. Yeah. Somebody was saying, like, how high does the vent have to be? We are in the basement here, so our vents are high up like that because that's actually ground level up there. So if I were on the outside of the building, those vents are only like 2-3 feet off the ground because we're underground here. So
we got a couple questions. So disadvantages of a plug-in. What was that? Hardwire versus plugging in your kiln?
So I just replaced the plug on one of my kilns. Actually, the plug is always a point of potential failure. So when you have electricity running into your kiln, it's got to go through the outlet into the plug into the kiln, and that plug over time can loosen. Every once in a while you may have to unplug it and replug it in, and so it's just a point where there's potential for arcing and failure. Whereas if you hardwire it to a shutoff, it eliminates that. There's no plug in the middle of between the breaker and the kiln. It just goes from the breaker straight to the kiln, and so it's definitely safer. It's definitely more efficient, but you can't unplug it. So like if you need to move it or anything like that, you need to deal with the hardwire and taking it apart that way. I'm going to read some comments. Let's see. Looking at buying an E23T. I make a lot of mugs. If I had a choice, would you upgrade to the Genesis or get the vent? Well, right now, Lori Bowling, I would get the vent and then get the free Genesis controller with that vent because that's the promo we're offering. But if you had to choose one or the other, vent for sure.
Can you talk about how, I know you talked a little bit, but we should talk about why vents are so important. There's a lot of
good reasons.
So,
and this gets into something that, Don, my dad, and I will probably cover a little bit tomorrow in the glazing demo. The vent is going to be super useful in a few different ways. Number one, the downdraft kiln vents attach underneath the kiln. So the reason that is important is when you fire your kiln, as anything, heat rises. So if you don't have a vent and heat rises, the top of the kiln is much more likely to be hotter than the bottom of the kiln. To the extent where I've seen kilns that were like a cone difference. You know, the top is a 6 and the bottom's a 5. And so the vent, which draws air, is going to pull air down in the kiln. So your top of your kiln, the heat is all of a sudden going to get sucked down to the bottom because it's going to be pulled out through the vent. So that's going to give you a more even firing. That's a little bit, so there's one reason why you would want a vent. Another reason, the gases that come out of pottery are organics. They're sulfides and carbons and things like that. And those gases will then leave your kiln and combine with moisture in the air to create things like sulfuric acid, which is what you see on the outsides of your kilns when they are corroded and super rusted and things like that. That's the gas in the kiln condensing with the condensation on the moisture in the air on the outside of your kiln and then eating the metal. So a vent, the downdraft kiln vent, takes all that gas directly out of your kiln before it can leave through all the cracks in the bricks and things like that. So it just sucks it right out. It's also the reason why I've replaced my vent pipes with PVC instead of metal, because the metal pipes for your vent will corrode. And so I've just replaced them with PVC because PVC won't corrode. And what's the other reason you want a vent? Those are the two main ones. Those are the two main ones.
Better environment for your health, even firing top to bottom, better glaze results, and I believe it's better for your elements. It's better for the life of the kiln. I mean, which is kind of you're talking about the outside.
Yeah, so, those, you know, if there's any moisture in your kiln, if there's any moisture in your kiln that's going to combine with that gas, it's going to corrode on your elements for sure.
And I want to say my E23T I've fired almost 50 times. It still looks brand new. There's not an ounce of corrosion on it anywhere. And I fire vents. My scut kiln, I never fired a vent. So we could just talk about that for a second. My scut kiln I had for 12 years, never fired a vent. It looked ancient by the time I was done. It was always one cone off from the top to the bottom. It was never ever even. I always had to know what glazes liked it cooler than the top. You know, it's
and there's a couple reasons for that. You know, the vent could have solved that problem for you, right? So like if 12 years you had your scut, you know, so if 12 years ago you got a vent, you know, that maybe would have evened out your firing a little bit. But the other thing is that, you know, those scuts, they only have the one thermocouple. So, you know, they don't adjust from section to section, whereas the L&L now can auto adjust. So if your top is firing hot, the L&L can say, hey, you're hot, so hold. And it'll tell the top section stop firing, but it'll keep the bottom two sections firing until they catch up, and then they'll all fire back together. And so that's really important for even firings. Look at all these comments. Holy moly.
I know. And I just wish when you bought a kiln, manufacturers would just put the vent in with it. I don't think it should be an option, because I think too many people, you know, we're budgeting for buying a kiln and it's a big expense. And you look at how much kilns cost, you figure, okay, that's what kilns cost. And then you got to put furniture, like, right? And then your controller. And then it's like, oh no, then the vent. But the fact is the vent is really necessary because it makes such a difference in your firing. And I know a lot of people don't get the vent because they only have so much of a budget and they hold back on the vent. And I wish I had done a vent sooner.
And what I always tell people is the vent, while it is really important, again, it is an option. So it is optional. You don't have to have a vent. But you know, depending on where your kiln is in your house, you may definitely need a vent. Now, the vent is always optional. You can always add it later, right? Like you can always add a vent later. So a year down the road, you can add a vent if you want. If you're going to put your kiln in an outdoor area where it's covered, it's got 3 walls or something like that, but it's not like inside, yeah, like you'll probably be fine. You can get away without a vent. If you're going to put it in a garage that, isn't really used, yeah, you'll probably be fine. You can get away without a vent. If it's going to go in your basement or like in a studio, in a room off the house somewhere, you definitely want a vent because it's in your living space,
We have some more vent questions. So I know there's other questions too, but I'm going to stick on the vent for a little while.
Yeah.
So does the vent keep your room from getting as hot?
No.
Because that's the whole kiln.
So the vent really, it vents gas, and while it does pull heat down in the kiln, as soon as that heat is outside of the kiln, it cools off incredibly fast. So that's why you can stand right next to your kiln, because once the heat leaves the kiln, it is gone basically. And so when you get to the vent outside the vent opening, it's like a dryer vent. It's not really hot.
And someone did ask, could you use a dryer vent for venting your kiln?
I mean, you could. The
Right.
vent hose that the dryer vents come with is going to deteriorate really quickly. But yeah, you can.
And someone asked, can I do it myself or do I have to professional do it? I mean, I did mine and
You can do it. Yeah, it's no
yeah,
problem.
you can do it yourself. I did mine and I have a video on Clayshare, a class on Clayshare showing you how to do it. I did it by myself. Well,
Yeah.
Kevin filmed and, made sure the camera was where it needed to be, but I did it alone. And I don't do usually things like that. So
that PVC pipe contraption that I put that together myself. It's not difficult, and it basically comes assembled. All you have to do is hook it up to your kiln. So.
And that was the other question is, can you run PVC venting? Do you run PVC venting under the kiln?
Yes. So the PVC that I have under the kiln, I put a piece of fiber blanket over the PVC. So it's between the PVC and the kiln. Put a little piece of ceramic fiber blanket in there so that it doesn't overheat. But I found that's unnecessary. It doesn't get hot enough under the kiln to melt PVC unless something were to go wrong.
And I wanted to mention, you can put more than one kiln on a vent too. Like I have two kilns on one vent system.
Yep. I have 2 vent systems. They're both dual hookups. So 4 kilns on 2 vents. I also, I would say that, talking about things going wrong, that's where the new kilns kind of really shine. The digital kilns, the digital controllers are really good at, if something is weird electrically, they will just shut off. They throw an error code and shut off. If you've got a manual kiln, you are probably, that manual kiln is going, if it errors or if something goes wrong with it, you have to be there to shut it off. And so, I really like the safety precautions that all of the new digital controllers have. So
we got a few questions that are just general kiln questions. One is, what can one do where there's rust and peeling paint outside of the kiln where the lid connects to the top of the base? Right now I'm getting rust falling into the kiln and have to vacuum every time I load.
So you can buy replacement metal bands for your kiln. I find that as soon as you take them off, though, the old ones off, you get into issues with the brick deteriorating underneath. You may need a new lid. That's just kind of, there's no saving that metal. Like, you could grind it down, but it's just going to be dust by the time you get done with it. So realistically, you're probably looking at a new lid.
Yeah, that sounds like you might want to, just for quality control for your pieces. And then we have another question. I have a space between my lid and the top of the kiln. Is this a problem?
No. So all of my kilns have a small gap, and it's where the vent not the vent. It's where the lid meets the kiln in the back. Okay. And that's because when the lid opens up like this, right? If it was flush, there's pressure on this brick here. Okay. So we need a little gap so that when it opens, it doesn't crush this brick. Okay. And sometimes what will happen is if your lid support slides down on the back of the kiln, you get pressure here and it crushes this brick and causes a gap in the front. A gap in the front is not good. We don't want that. And to solve that gap in the front, we need to lift the lid in the back. Okay. So we want a little gap in the back, because what happens is as the kiln fires, the brick expands and that'll close up a little bit. But a little bit of a gap in the back is fine. A gap in the front means we need a little bit of a lid adjustment to get rid of that. Do you have to plug? Go ahead.
Someone asked, where can you get the fiber blanket from?
We sell it. It's just,
okay,
it's the same fiber blanket that we use to make the raku kiln. I sell it by the square foot. So you can buy, I think a square foot's like $4 or something like that. So yeah, it's just something you can get.
Okay. And so someone, doesn't the kiln need to be stationary for a vent? I fire mine in the basement and I have to push it to the end of the basement and open a window and crack the garage doors because hers on wheels.
Sure. So what I would do in that situation is I would almost have, like, your kiln is mobile, but your vent would be stationary. So you would move your kiln over to where you need to fire it. And if you've got a window there, you have your vent mounted in the window. You take a pane of glass out, put a piece of wood in, mount the vent there, and you have the hose that goes down. And then underneath your kiln, which is on wheels, you'll have that part mounted. And when you roll it over, you can just click, hook them together and fire it. And then when you need to roll it back away, you can unclick it. And, like a hardware store, finding like a quick release for like a PVC or something like that would be really helpful in that situation. But yeah, that just would require a little bit of extra figuring to figure out how you'd want to have that like attach and disengage.
Now, what vents are the ones that the brand name that you all have there?
Well, so the vent that I have is called the Vent Shore. That's the L&L's version of the vent.
Mm-hmm. We had a question about, are the Venta Kiln brands vent good? I don't know.
I think the Venta Kilns are the like hood vents that you can lower over the top of your kiln. They do vent. They will vent. My issue with those is, as opposed to the Downdraft kiln vents, the Vent Shore or like the Scut, they have the Enviro vent. They attach underneath and they are direct vents. So they vent the gas straight out of the kiln. The Venta Kilns, they suck out all of the air around the outside of the kiln. So in order to vent, the gas has to escape the kiln first and then get sucked up into the hood vent. My issue with those is it doesn't catch everything and it doesn't solve the problem of the life of your kiln because everything's already happened. Like it's already out of the kiln and then it gets sucked up. And by then, like it's already done the damage, right? So it doesn't help you get a more even firing because it doesn't draw down.
That's my big thing.
Yeah. And then it also doesn't help you extend the life of your elements because it's only venting the stuff that's outside the kiln. And it doesn't help you with the life of your metal casing on your kiln because it's already outside of the kiln. The only thing it's good for is venting the area around the kiln so you're not breathing it in. So it's okay in that sense, but that's only 1 out of 4, we're looking at the vent checklist, 1 out of 4 versus 4 out of 4. So Brittany, yeah, so that one's
yes, with some electrical questions. Why do some kilns have electrical 3-phase versus single phase?
Sure. So one of the big things that if you were to call me up at Clayscapes and say, hey, I want to buy a kiln, let's figure out, I don't know what I want. One of the things that I'm going to go through is electrical, and kilns are built to order. So when you buy a kiln, I don't have it just sitting here. Usually we've kind of gone to stocking a few kilns, but normally, you place the order and then I let the kiln manufacturer know, hey, I need this kiln and it needs to have these electrical specs. So the kiln that you want is going to be built for you. And those electrical specs, single phase versus 3-phase, 240 volts versus 208 volts, that's going to be dictated by the electricity that you have available where you're putting the kiln. Typically, when you're at home, you're 240 volts and you're single phase. That's just residential electric in the United States. It's pretty much all 240 volt single phase. Here at Clayscapes, we are in an industrial part of the city. The building that we're in has a lot more electricity to it. And so we run 208 volts and 3-phase. And basically that means that we can get the same amount of bang for our buck, but it costs us less. So there's just different types of electricity, and you want to make sure that you get the one specifically for you. So when you find a used kiln on Craigslist and, some school is selling it, you want to make sure that it's, 240 volt single phase. I've had people go and buy $1,000 used kiln from a school and get it home just to find out that it's 3-phase and they can't use it. So, those are always things that you want to make sure you're looking into.
Well, yes, we got some more questions and I want to, I want to get to those. So there was another question and I wanted to find out about power. Trying to get that. So let's just go with this one. Okay. So the furniture kit that comes with the 28 is half shelves, but what is isn't there a risk when using half shelves with big platters?
Half
shelves are great.
Can have there is a little bit of a risk when you use half shelves with big platters. Because what happens is it's going to shrink, right? And when it shrinks, it can catch on that line. What I do, if we were to fire this platter here, this is an artist's that my mom bought, but if we were to fire something like this here, I'm going to put down a bed of grog, and I'm not going to just sprinkle like a little bit of grog on there. We usually will put down like a 1/4 inch thick bed of grog that covers the whole thing. And basically what that does is it's going to act like a little nest of ball bearings, so that when the plate shrinks in the firing, the grog moves and gives way to the shrinkage, so that you're not going to hit that crack. So
I'm just going to chime in and say no. I'm going to say put the grog down, but don't do 2 half shelves ever for the platter. The problem, because half shelves warp over time. You're going to have 2 shelves, each might have warped a little bit, and then you put your platter on it. You have the warpage possibly on 2 shelves now and the span you're trying to go across. You can buy whole shelves as big as you want. You can find them, they're out there. They might not be the furniture kit that comes with the kiln. I have never bought a furniture kit. I have once bought a furniture kit with my kiln, but I don't do that now. I buy my kiln and then I buy my furniture separate, because for me, I already have a lot of shelves. That's why. Everybody else out there, if you're first getting one, that's probably the best way to go. And because I do a lot of big platters, I buy whole shelves. So if you're getting cracking on your big plates and platters, you want to put it on a whole shelf. You don't want to never span anything across 2 shelves if you can help it.
And the kiln
and
wash also, like if you have a
Mhm.
different amount of kiln wash buildup, if you've ever had to chip your
Right.
kiln wash, like even on a half shelf, you can have difference in kiln wash layer, and that can cause you to get cracking. So you always want to make sure that, you know, you're working as flat as possible. So like I do have a couple of shelves that are full rounds that are 26 inches. They're super heavy. That's one of the reasons I don't sell them, is because they're so heavy. But they're also really expensive. Like one 26-inch full round hollow core shelf is like $120. And so, you know, you just want to make sure that you're using, I mean, what's best for you.
So we had a question, why have a kiln that is a round or round-ish, you know, because it can be octagons, and why
Yep.
have that instead of a box, like a front load type
Sure.
kiln?
So I find, so there's a few different things. We have here in the studio, I've got the rounds, and I've got a big rectangle and a big square. The square is 11 cubic feet, and my rounds are 10 cubic feet. I can stack in my square half as much more than in my round. Okay, so even though it's only 1 cubic foot more, I could put like 50% more work in it because of the way you can stack in a square kiln. Now, that being said, the difference between your top loader and your front loader, similar, you can probably stack more in your front loader, but a lot of people think it's better on their back to be able to load into a front loader. But I find that that's not the case, especially when you have to load kiln shelves up and then lean in like this. It's just as bad on your back than leaning over into a kiln. So I typically don't recommend front loaders to people unless it's going to be going into like a school situation or a classroom situation. I don't offer, like if you were to call me up and say, hey, I'm going to put a front loader and it's going to go in my garage, I won't sell it to you, basically.
And I do want to agree with Drew. My gas kiln is a front load, so I front load in. It's a 16 cubic foot. It's a monster kiln. My electric kilns are top load. And when I was getting my last electric kiln, I looked at the front load, and I can tell you, I have lifting the shelves up into the kiln. And that's the hard part. You strain yourself lifting up into the kiln.
Because you have to balance, make sure you don't drop it on everything underneath it.
Right. And yes, the top load, you have to bend down and load in, but you're going down. It's much easier. And I do suggest, if you are a petite lady like myself, a petite gal, I got my E23T, which I love, but honestly, I would have gone with the E28S I'm getting as my big kiln. If I had thought about it a little more, I guess I should have talked to Drew a little more instead of just picking the kiln that I thought I wanted, because I wouldn't have to bend so far in. So this is why we're talking about
kilns
this.
are really nice. And people worry about like not being able to make the work that they want because the 2-section kilns are so short. But again, you know, if I take this piece here, you know, this is a 14.5-inch piece that you can do in a 2-section kiln. Like it's no problem. So, you know, unless you're making something 3 feet tall, you know, you're fine. You know,
exactly. And that comes right back to getting the right kiln for your pottery needs, because if you're making tall, skinny pieces, you want a tall kiln. If you're making, you know, just average height, then you go with a 2-section. So there's a lot of questions about kiln shelves. People want to know about, you know, do kiln shelves fire and kiln furniture to different temperatures? So you can get like
different types of kiln shelves. One of the things when we first started selling L&L kilns, they have a different supply of kiln shelves than Scott, and they're better. So the kiln shelves that we sell are the high alumina kiln shelves. They're good to cone 10 or higher, and consistently. I have not had any issues with warpage Cracking is based on how you stilt a lot of times. And so, not stilt, post. And so we just sell those. You know, you used to be able to get these old Thorley shelves that are thicker and made out of a different material, and those were good. But the newer corduroy shelves are not as good. You know, they have a lot of cracking issues and things, warpage issues and things like that. So I mean, there is like a tier system of quality as far as kiln shelves are concerned. I mean, you can get the advancers, which are super light, super expensive, but you can get them. So yeah, I mean, it's just preference. We sell the high aluminas. We find that they're really excellent as far as cost. They're not as crazy as the advancers, but they're affordable still.
And so I'm seeing people asking, is there a firing disadvantage to buying a short versus tall kiln?
Nope.
No, just what you need. And can you address production studio needs? You run a community clay center. You are kind of like what a production studio would be doing as far as the volume of firings. Sure. So you can probably talk a lot about what a production studio would need.
So we have, like, my older kilns are my bisque kilns, and we just, they're constantly firing. I don't know, like, as far as needs, like, you want something that's rated to the higher temperature, cone 10, because we're firing mid-range, and you want something that's going to be able to take and do a lot of firings. If you're in a production studio and you want to be able to maximize the amount of firings that you get out of your kiln, you can upgrade to the APM elements, or the E-Quad Pro has like a heavier duty element than the normal ones. So there's all kinds of options. I know that on the kilns websites, there's so many different kilns that you can get. And, in a production studio, L&L has like a production line of Jupiter kilns or Da Vinci kilns that are really heavy duty. And so that's always an option. And, I'm always happy to help. It's hard to address, like, we can go over the kind of generalizations of the kiln's width and your electrical specs. Do you have a 60 amp breaker? Do you have a 30 amp breaker? What kind of stuff are you making? But each person's going to have those individual needs that, if you want, you just give me a call or shoot me an email, and, I will help you figure it out. I will say that, we love you guys there at Clayshare. We are here to help you. If you have a distributor or somebody that sells kilns locally, and you don't feel comfortable working on your own kiln, go and find out what kind of kilns they sell. Are they going to be able to work on your kiln for you? Because if they are, you don't want to buy the kiln from me that they're not, if they're not familiar with L&L, and then you buy an L&L and go to them and need help with it, they're going to go, I don't know. So, buy local. Or like I said, if you need help and you are happy to do your own repair work, I'm here for you.
And honestly, the repair work, I don't want anybody to be scared by it.
So
I
easy.
It's really easy. I think people are only afraid because we're afraid of what we don't know. And it seems like it's daunting because they're like, oh, I can't fix my own car. How can I fix a kiln? But a kiln is very simple. I have built my own kiln. I've built many other kilns before I had, my gas kiln here, but I've built my own kiln, and I knew nothing about doing it until I started doing it. And, if you can read instructions or watch a video, you can do it yourself. So don't be afraid of needing to live near a repair person. One time I paid for somebody to replace my elements, and I actually had to take my kiln to them. They put the new elements in and I brought it back, and I paid $800 to do that. That's a lot. That's a lot of money. Because I had no time is why I did it.
And I used to do kiln repairs, and I just don't have the time to do it now. I don't have the time to spend driving 2 hours to go fix someone's kiln and then driving 2 hours back. That's my whole day. And so, having the videos, how to replace your elements, how to, we have those up there on Clayshare.
Right.
So, they're good.
So we got a couple questions I want to quickly get through. Difference in firing a full kiln or 1 or 2 pieces in the kiln?
No, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's all about
Well,
firing efficiency. I have fired a 15 cubic foot kiln with 1 pot in it. It's all about whether or not, how urgently you need that piece,
yeah,
right?
I mean, I've done it. I've needed a piece and I fired 1 piece in the kiln. Did it come out fine? Yeah, it was great. Is it good for my electric bill? No.
No,
But you
yeah,
can
I mean,
do
that's
it
it, right? Like
if you need to.
it costs you the same amount to fire that kiln with 1 piece in it or 50 pieces in it. And if you're okay
Right.
with it and you want that piece, go to town.
So we got a question. Do you ever fire an empty kiln? They'd read somewhere that doing this from time to time is good for your kiln's longevity.
They like to tell you when you put a new set of elements in your kiln or you get your new kiln to do that first initial firing empty. But that's not something that we do. Like I don't ever fire an empty kiln.
And I don't either. Even when I got my new kiln, they want you to test it. You can fire it empty, but
I put stuff in it. Yeah.
I want to see. I put a pot. I put 1 pot in because I wanted to see how my glaze was going to melt in there.
Yep.
So, some questions. Do the kilns come with a hole in the bottom for the vent?
Only if you order a vent with it. So if you order a kiln and you don't order a vent with it, it will not have that hole in the bottom. If you order a kiln with a vent, it'll come pre-drilled. So if you don't, just if you order a vent later on, you just drill a hole later on. It's super easy.
So there's a lot of questions, and I know we can't get to everybody's questions.
Yes.
It's just not going to be possible because we are getting close to having to wrap
I will
up.
say that because this is Saturday and it's 1 o'clock, Clayscapes is only open until 1 on Saturdays. I'm going to hang around in the office here and be checking up on my emails. So if anybody has questions on kilns and you want to continue to ask right after this, feel free to shoot me an email.
Go over, so I see some people asking about amps. Is 80 amp okay for
80 amps a ton? Yeah, like you could get whatever kiln you want for 80 amps.
Yeah, you do whatever you want. And there's a lot of questions. So everybody, you're going to have your own individual electric, like what you have available, your electric budget, as Drew likes to call it. And you should reach out to him. He will help you individually.
Yeah.
Even if you don't buy a kiln from Drew, he will help you get the right kiln.
Yes.
He's helped people who couldn't buy a kiln from him because they weren't in the same country. And you just let him know. And he's helped people who didn't buy their kiln from him that have had kiln issues. You can reach out to Drew and he will help you out. You don't have to buy anything from him to get his help. He just wants to help and make sure you get the right kiln. So,
and I will be offering I just shot my email in the chat for folks, but the promo is going to be good through the end of next week because I know that Clayscapes is going to end tomorrow and I'm not going to be in the office. So I don't want you to feel like you're getting gypped. So you're going to, I'm going to extend, that promo is good through the end of next week. So.
Yeah. And again, it's just, there's so much kiln information. We could do, we have talked before about kilns and we could do this for all afternoon. We could do nothing but this till 4 o'clock and we still wouldn't get all your questions because every individual person has
every single circumstance is different.
Is completely different. No one kiln is the right kiln, but I am going to say right now that new E14S that's coming out, the brand new one that's now out from L&L that Drew can order for you, but he can't get. Well, he doesn't have one in stock. He can order it, but he doesn't have one to show you. He'll get them, but he doesn't have one to show. That might be the perfect beginner hobbyist kiln, I think.
Yeah, it's right between like the small size hobby and the test kiln. So if you wanted to fire, the test kiln fires 4 mugs, the 14S is going to fire 6 mugs. And then it'll probably fire 18
more because you got 2 shelves in there
you can stack it
because
higher.
It's 18 inches tall instead of 9 inches and it's 14 instead of 11. So it's good. It's a good kiln. I don't need it, but I like it.
Nope, you don't need it. You're cut off.
All right, Drew, thank you so much for a very informative talk about kilns and firing and what's the right kiln for you. Like I mentioned, if anybody out there, you have any questions at all about what is the right kiln for you, budget-wise, electrical budget, financial budget, and your pottery making needs, ask Drew. Like I said, I have my my baby kiln, which is great for test firings and luster firings and small pieces and small batches I need to turn around fast. I have an E23T, which I love because I do sometimes tall forms, and so I need the tall one. But I've been doing more and more platters, and they're getting bigger and bigger, and I want to do bigger. So now I had to get an E28S. If I was just a hobby potter, I would not have that many kilns, but I do this all the full time, so it's different. It's a little different,
Right. Yeah.
and I don't want you
different
all
needs.
right, and I don't want you all to buy a kiln that is the wrong kiln first time buying a kiln. Like, you just want to do one and done. So
Right.
contact Drew. He's going to help you. You're going to get the right kiln for your needs, and you'll be very.
So thank you everyone for tuning in. We are going to be sending this over at 1:15 to Jeff from GR Pottery Forums, and he is going to do glazing and firing large pieces. So that's going to be a really fun little tutorial. So I'll see you